Okay, so I want to talk to you about a neat little trick that you can use to fatten up your vocal a little bit more. Or if not fatten up the vocal, you can help emphasize the vocal. And that is to get a MIDI instrument, a VST, playing the same melody as your vocal. So I'll just do this on my chorus vocal again. And if I go into there, obviously I've got all the pitch information that is that vocal. So once again, of course, to recreate this pitch information in MIDI, you could just copy it. If your DAW does not support extracting MIDI, then you can just copy the notes and the placements of them and just draw them into MIDI. But in Cubase, I can just hit extract MIDI. And down here, I could select notes and continuous pitch bend data. So this will actually, any little bits of vibrato, any slight little pitch bends in my vocal will actually be taken out and recorded in the MIDI. I don't actually want that. It can sound a little bit too funky when you're trying to get a synth to play over the top, but you can of course experiment with that. It's quite a handy little feature. So I'm just going to select notes and static pitch bend data. You can also have it selected so it will record the velocity of your singing. But again, that can sort of cause it to be a bit all over the place. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep it on fixed velocity for what I want to do. But again, you can experiment with that and you can get some good results with it. And you can get the synth that you're going to use to follow along with your vocal even more accurately. But just be careful with it because sometimes it does end up with funky results. Now Cubase has extracted the MIDI for me. It always dumps it down the bottom, so I'll just move that to the top. So it's important to pick the right sound to use to sort of help emphasize your vocal. And I found that it's really better to use a vocal sounding synth, so something that's a bit throaty or a choir sound instrument like I'll show you in a minute. If you start using things like saw leads and stuff like that, yes, it can be done, and in some certain circumstances it can sort of help. If you want to beef the low end of a vocal, then you can use a slightly more synth, actual synth based sound, and feel free to experiment with this, but it can be a little bit hit and miss. So I'm going to show you one of the ways that I know definitely does sort of work. So I'm going to load up a rompler called Omnisphere by Spectrasonics. And in this behemoth of a VST instrument, it has plenty of human voice samples. So I'm just going to go down and select Men's Choir Ooze, jump out of there, route my MIDI track through to the Omnisphere, and I'll just play that. So I just need the main notes there. I don't need these extra little bits. They kind of just make it sound a bit funky. Same with this. I am animal. I am animal. I am animal. Now, of course, that may not be exactly what this track needs. Sounds just a bit like it's sort of been just pasted in there. And yes, it kind of does add a bit to the vocal. Of course, it's mixed a bit too loud at the moment as well, but it just sounds a little bit sort of unnatural. So just tweak the mix a bit. I am animal. And much like with parallel processing, it's better to keep the mix level of this element that you're adding in quite low. You really don't want it to be totally noticeable. If you listen to it fair enough, you can probably hear it, but you want to keep it so it's not too prominent. So it doesn't take the listener's ears away from the main vocal. And of course, I could send this Omnisphere through to my parallel processing track to give it some saturation warmth. So yes, that might start to sort of help a little bit, but I really want to get that choir sound to follow the vocal exactly in a velocity sensitive way. So what I can actually do is add a gate to my VST instrument track. I just use the Cubase gate, and in this gate it has a sidechain function. So I can activate the sidechain and I can go to my Vox lead group, the channel settings, and in here I can then select to send a signal through to that gate on my Omnisphere channel on the VST instrument. Let's just solo the Omnisphere and the Vox lead. I am animal, animal. I am animal. So let's just have a listen without. I am animal. And then with. I am animal. And there you can hear it's actually just made that tighten right up. I am animal, animal. So it becomes much less apparent that there's actually something there when you sidechain gated it to the original signal source, the vocal group that we're trying to beef up here. So let's just have a listen. The pain and all your suffering is the same pain that I feel. I am animal. And of course, I don't have to use a men's choir. It could be any vocal sample that you've got. Or perhaps you're even using a vocal program like Lola from Vocaloid or something like that, where you could actually literally take the MIDI from your actual vocal, put it into Lola, and then have the computer actually come up with like a female singer to layer up with your original singing. So you can really just try any sort of preset that you want. Animal. And like I say, of course, you don't have to try it on purely vocal sounds. You can try and experiment a bit. Animal. Animal. And you can get some really cool effects, something that really, because it's following exactly the same pitch as your vocal and the same velocity now that you've sidechain gated it, it can really sort of have some creative possibilities there. So you can see, that's just a small example of what you can actually achieve with it. It's not meant to replace the main vocal. All it's doing is you're trying to enhance it. First of all, when you're trying to mix these sort of effects in, always just start with the volume right down and just bring it up until you feel like it's just pronouncing the vocal a little more, just helping emphasize the vocal a little more rather than overtaking or becoming a whole new element in and of itself. Of course, if you wanted to use it as an element in and of itself, then that's totally fine. You can do that.